Bodega.
I'm ready.
Part 19.
What about Nineteen-a-reno? How about adding a reno to the end
Nineteen-a-reno.
Sweet.
Kytos had been born, for want of a better word, on the planet Sigil, at the same time as all the other Sigilese beings in the galaxy. All the Sigilese that had ever been or would ever be were created then, in a single moment, fully formed and conscious. One moment the universe wasn't there, the next it was, and the Sigilese were too. All their houses, roads, a sewer system, socialized medicine, and education, and really good internet. It was like Sweden suddenly existing. It was this infinitely unlikely double event that led the Sigilese to believe that they were special, extremely special. So special, in fact, that their creation was even less likely than the creation of the universe itself. Imagine a cake suddenly popping into existence out of nothing. That's pretty unlikely. Now imagine that same cake popping into existence, covered in icing and sprinkles and the words, "Good luck in your new job, Steve, love Mum," written on it. That's even less likely. The Sigilese were the icing on the cake, and they knew it. This also asks some pretty big questions. For example, what the flav? This was a common question among scientists when confronted with the Sigilese problem. If the universe kind of made sense, the Sigilese really didn't, and it caused a huge rift in the scientific community that lingered to this day. Some concluded that the Sigilese creation story was a myth, that they just happened to be one of the oldest civilizations around, but carbon dating of early Sigilese artifacts proved it. They were as old as the universe, to the nanosecond in fact. Because of their self-appointed status as the most improbable and therefore most important race around, the Sigilese were almost insufferable in their egotism. Some people were proud to be tall or strong, some were proud of their race's grand history of conquest or exploration. The Sigilese just figured that their creation alone was much more than anything anyone else could really come up with, so they paraded around wearing jewelry older than some people's solar systems. Some of them even had pairs of jeans older than people's galaxies. If you tried to reminisce near a Sigilese, you'd better be prepared to have your anecdote trumped into the next dimension. Naturally, many people believed the Sigilese to be proof of the existence of a divine creator. I mean, come on, they would say. If that's not proof, then what the flav would be? And they were kind of right. It was nuts. But the Sigilese did not believe in God. The idea that there was something out there even fancier than them was just ridiculous. And the idea that God would create a race of people who didn't believe in him at all sealed the deal for many scientists. This was just one of those weirdo things that happens in an infinite universe. End of story. Kytos was approximately 13 billion years old. He'd done everything he ever needed to do, satisfied every desire, and achieved more than any non-Sigilese being could ever achieve. The list was so long it would take around 1 billion years just to read it. Kytos, of course, had spent 1 billion years, around 5 billion years ago, running through all the things he'd ever done and recording this on a series of long-life crystal storage devices. But the crystals had decayed around 1 billion years later, and he just couldn't be flaved to start again. He'd also realized no non-Sigilese would ever live long enough to read even 1% of what he'd written down, so what was the point? And so, like all old people, Kytos had started volunteering a lot. He had the free time, he didn't need money since his bank account had 13 billion years worth of interest in it, and his kids were so grown up they were older than 90% of the known universe. When that young pup Bodega had approached him asking for help, Kytos had said yes instantly, even though what Bodega had asked him was so trivial to Kytos that it barely deserved his attention. The late-era Kytos turned no friend down, no matter the request. It was hard enough to make friends anyway when you knew you'd outlive them by billions of years, so he clung to the ones he did have. As requested, Kytos parked in his unbelievably cool ship in Krem Slum Dump's home system, Gurk, in orbit around the lush green Gurk 1. Krem wasn't home, but Majesta was, and Kytos was the one who had introduced her to Bodega. He was here to clear the air between the two errant lovers, since it was too dangerous for Bodega to come to Gurk himself. Kytos reached out with his mind, knowing Majesta would hear his thoughts. Within minutes, a sleek blue vessel span up gracefully from the planet below and positioned itself alongside Kytos' ship. Majesta materialized on his bridge a moment later. "You don't need the ship, do you?" he asked her. "No, of course not, but I like the ceremony of it," she said, looking around and smiling. Kytos admired her perfect beauty. She was tall yet delicate. Her hair was so thick it looked like a few dozen birds could easily nest in it. Her breasts and buttocks seemed locked in a battle to outdo one another, and her face was so perfect it was hard to look directly at it. Warm and loving, but also aloof and haughty. When she smiled, it seemed that no other achievement was worth striving towards. Kytos had long ago given up on love. He'd had trillions of lovers, but Majesta? She was something else. Naturally, Kytos would wait until after Bodega had died before making a move, and he'd wait a good few millennia after that just to be polite. "Do your psychic powers work on me?" asked Kytos playfully. He knew full well that Sigilese minds were impenetrable. "Only when you want them to," she said distractedly. I'm here because, began Kytos, but Majesta silenced him, pressing a perfect finger to his lips. I know. Bodega's mind is open to me, and I sense his every thought and every action, unfortunately. He does love you, doesn't he? Asked Kytos. Majesta began walking around Kytos' ship, running her hand over its ridiculously ergonomic surfaces. Kytos, you're older than I am, but we share something. A curiosity that extends beyond our powers, or in your case, your longevity. Bodega loves me, of course, but he's very confused. He is. And I am too, actually, said Kytos, frowning. Tam was a mistake. Our child wasn't. Bodega didn't want children, and I did. What about Krem? Asked Kytos. I'm seeing where that goes for now. Bodega sees people through their actions, as most do. I don't. She stood with her back to Kytos, staring at Gurk 1 through the viewport. I know every facet of someone's personality the moment I meet them. Every lie they tell themselves, all the things they regret and the things they don't, but should. For a long time, I held off reading Bodega's mind because I wanted to experience love the way others do. But eventually I became curious. One night while he slept, I journeyed into Bodega's mind, and what I found was, well, it scared me. What was it? Asked Kytos, genuinely intrigued for the first time in around 15,000 years. That's private, said Majesta, admonishing Kytos with the gentlest of glances that still crushed his spirit more deeply than the time he'd accidentally landed his ship on a Dildonian school bus. I must know, he said, taking a half step forwards. I will not tell you, save to say that the universe and Bodega have much in common. I knew that the more time I spent with Bodega, the more I'd become lost in his complexities. I wanted to spend time with more simple men, to enjoy their lack of depth. That seems awfully unfair, said Kytos, sitting down in his chair and tapping in a new course. You're leaving? Asked Majesta. I came here for my friend, to ask why. That's what he'd requested, just that. Ask her why, said Kytos, turning in his seat to face Majesta. Looking up at her this way made her seem so imperious and alluring that Kytos decided to shave a millennia or two off his polite waiting time. I asked why, and the answer I will return with is that Bodega is too much for you. You can't handle that man, he said. Majesta's face contorted into something like anger for a moment, so subtle that Kytos almost missed it. She vanished from the bridge, and her ship blasted back towards the planet's surface. Kytos would return to Bodega with a message. He would tell Bodega that, eventually, she would be his again. No woman can resist a man she cannot change. The end.
Nice. Oh my god.
Oh god.
I love Lewis's string of reactions.